That's the primary goal of today is to talk about NBA offseason grades, talk about everything that's been going on in the NBA offseason, try to give kind of a better perspective of what's been happening, what teams have been doing, kind of where they've been sitting, the moves they've made, how their rosters are looking, and everything in between. Obviously, everybody's going to have individual questions about the teams that they like and the teams that they watch and who their favorites are and everything else. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Toronto Raptor and LA Clipper conversations going on because obviously it's topical right now. We don't really know what's going to happen. So, with that in mind, I am going to base my grades off of what logically should happen. So, like in this, the Kawhi Leonard trade is something that has occurred. We will just go with it like that and base it off of that and be optimists when it comes to these things, because I think that's a little bit easier to make it work than going the other way around it, right? Which is, hopefully these things happen. Maybe they don't. Who knows? Right. But this has been a wild NBA offseason in general. Tons of movement, tons of big moves in general, big trades, big free agent signings, massive landscape changes for the infrastructure of the league entirely. And we're actually gonna have visual aids today as well, which is a new thing for me. I actually haven't done a live with visual aids, I don't think yet. So if you're on the TikTok side or the Instagram side, like I think on Instagram you can see the visual aids when I pop them up, but on TikTok, if you want to hop over to YouTube and watch on there so you can get some of the visual aids as well, that's totally understandable. But we're just going to kind of jump right into it, and hopefully this works. Like I said, I haven't done this before, so I'm hoping that the slides all show up and everything else. I am like I said, people know kind of where my skill set lays. It is with the information. It's not so much with the technology. So I'm getting there. Just to let everybody know too, when it comes to the new podcast and the new show through True Sports Live, we're going to be recording our first episode on Thursday. So this upcoming Thursday, so the 14th, I think that is, we're actually going to be doing our 13th. We're going to be doing our first actual recording day. We've got a whole lot going on there. We're going to do NBA season previews and off-season reviews, kind of, and let people know division by division, it seems, where kind of teams stand on going forward into the NBA season this year. So that will be a lot of fun. Again, if you have questions, comments, anything like that, put them into the chat, right? So I'm here to listen and kind of answer the questions that you guys provide. If you like the content, you want to support the content, there are options through YouTube, stuff like super chats, memberships that are available. I would be starting to put up members only content since we do have a little bit of a membership base now. For the largest scale membership that I do, you actually get one custom video a month. So if that is, you want me to break down your jump shot, or you want me to give you pitching feedback, since I am a pitching coordinator with an organization, I can do that. If you want me to break down a specific prospect or a specific thing, then we can go about it that way as well. But those are options available. So those are great ways to support the channel. There's also merch on the way. I had somebody reach out to me about trying to build some merch for me, which was a really cool opportunity and something that was awesome to hear. So if that's something that interests you, that should be coming along the way. But keep your eyes out for the new podcast that's dropping. I'll be posting that across all platforms when we have more information about the date that's going to come out. So we'll go through that as it comes up. And hopefully everybody can see the slideshow that I've posted up. It's not the most visually appealing, but like it gives you the rundown, right? I'm doing what I can. So first and foremost, we'll start with the Atlanta Hawks, right? So Atlanta Hawks, first off, I think they had a really good offseason. Like flat out. We'll see what happens with Jonathan Kuminga. We'll see if they're able to get a little bit for him in a sign and trade or whatever it is. But obviously, so they've re-signed Jock Landale to a tradable contract. Some people have been like, why is Jock Landale getting that much money? The reason is it's an easily traded contract for that value that it's at. They brought back CJ McCollum, who was great for them after the trade last year. They added Devin Carter, a guy that I just love. Obviously, I don't think he's going to get a ton of opportunity on this team either with how much depth they have, but I'm a Devin Carter guy. I always have been. They added Lou Dort. They added Ryan Nembhard. They added Aaron Wiggins. I think the Aaron Wiggins ad is spectacular. In the draft, I thought they were winners of the draft. Kingston Fleming's at 8, I think is a great pickup. Zubi Ejiofor was a guy that I really liked. He fits really well with the Onyeka Okongwu build. I know some people are hoping for a supersized center to give them something that's a little bit different than what they've had in the past. But the reality is I think Zubi's a really good player. He can play with Onyeka. He can play with Jalen Johnson at the 4. He's very, very versatile. He's going to rebound the basketball. He's going to defend at a super high level. And I think he's got a little bit more offensive game than people give him credit for. And then Henry Vesar at 52, which was a manufactured slide. Let's just be real about it. Is a really, really strong ad for this team in general. So I like their offseason. The only real loss they had was Zachary Ricochet, which I think Ricochet still has the potential to be a good player in this league. I just think that sometimes it's going to be a little bit tricky when you're a number 1 pick and things don't go well. At the end of the day, he shot 36% from 3 over his career so far. I agree. I think that Atlanta knocked it out of the park in the draft, 100%. And like I said, it's tricky. So they dealt him off. I think he'll have a fresh start in Dallas, and we'll see how that goes. But I think it was the right move at the right time, and you're clearing off that potential $17 million that's on his books, because obviously that salary cap number is big because he was a number 1 pick. As an overall offseason, you look at the depth of this team with what they have now, with their guard rotation being, CJ McCollum and Dyson Daniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kingston Flemings. They've got, Lou Dort at the more of a wing position, but, Devin Carter and Ryan Nembhard is like depth guys. I just think that they've added so much depth to their guard position, and you can do multiple looks now, which is really, really critical in the NBA as it is today. It's a really, really critical thing to have this amount of depth because it's a fast-paced league and they play at a fast pace. I would say that the Atlanta Hawks had an A- offseason. A-, which is great. So we will base this off of the idea that B- is average. So that's the high end of average. C+ is the low end of average. But that's kind of where I'm going to rank it as. This is an average offseason, a C+ to B-, right? So that's the major minor of the average grades. I think this is an A- offseason. Would you have loved to see them go get like a premier guard to add to this group? Yeah, I guess. But like CJ McCollum was great with them last year, and I think Kingston Flemings gives them that potential upside, which is massive, right? Somebody asked me about Lonzo Ball. Lonzo, unfortunately, the knees look cooked. He just couldn't move last year at all. It's tricky, right? I was always a big Lonzo fan, so that's tough. Somebody just says, I appreciate the TikTok video about the situation happening over the WNBA now. We need some voices online because these grifters trying to latch on and destroy it. Yeah, 100%, man. I'm always going to be outspoken. If anybody knows me from my previous social medias, the social media account that was taken away, which is like, that's my big social media account. That was near 250,000 followers at one point. It built up quite nicely, and that was all about politics and let's say social reform. So I've always been an outspoken advocate for people who are, who face real prejudices from the general populace, right? So, but yeah, so that's that on that. But Atlanta Hawks, A- offseason. They had a killer offseason as for the most part. Thoughts on Andre Jackson Jr.? Rishi says, I'll talk about him a little bit with the Raptors section, but like honestly, for a 2-way or for a tryout contract deal, I like it, man. Kid defends his ass off. The offense is bad at the end of the day. But like it's, like I said, he defends his ass off. He's a great athlete. I like Andre Jackson for the most part. Like, yeah, would it be great if he could shoot the 3? Yes, but a tryout contract is a tryout contract for a reason, right? You're not getting perfect players for that at the end of the day. Easy pivot. What is it with Kuminga? I see his potential, but coach doesn't like his game. Honestly, it's a great segue. I appreciate you asking that question because it is a really, really, really fitting question for the Atlanta Hawks before we get on to the Celtics. The downhill offense is great. So with ball in hand, he does a really good job of kind of getting to his spots for the most part. The overall basketball IQ is really low. the defense has the potential to be really good, but it's never really clicked. There are flashes where he can be like a good solid defender, but it's never really performed at that level. He's still quite young. Off ball, he just doesn't work enough. Like he just doesn't feel the court well. So he is a guy that needs the basketball to be successful. And the unfortunate thing is he's not good enough to be a primary hub of an offense. So he fits into a six-man role, and clearly he has a high opinion of himself, which he should, right? Like these guys should all be trying to get all the money that they can. But the reality is I just don't think his skill set is overly valuable with the style of play that he has. And I think the NBA has kind of agreed with me on that, where I think there's a lot more nuance to the game that you need. And his game doesn't provide much is the reality, so it's unfortunate, but it is what it is, right? Moving on to the Boston Celtics. They re-signed Ron Harper Jr. and Nimi Keita and Jordan Walsh. All three of these players, I think they did a great job. A great job in terms of getting these guys back on good deals. Some creative deals on there as well to provide them with depth. They added Mike Conley. They obviously got Paul George in the Jaylen Brown deal, and then they signed Mitchell Robinson as well. So as long as Mitchell Robinson can stay healthy, which I know is a massive if, they have 48 minutes of center play. That is super, super high level at what they want to do right now. That's not a slight at Luka Garza, or I guess it's a little bit of a slight at Luka Garza and Nick Vucevic, who they have specific skill sets, but I think at this point in their careers, they're both third big men, right? I think Luka Garza's always been a third big. I think Vooch has just kind of transitioned to that later in his career. But the idea of Mitchell Robinson and Nimi Keita for 48 minutes is very, very, very challenging to deal with, right? As a center position, they're going to physically beat you up a little bit. And for people that want to know kind of where I'm at on the TikTok side or anywhere else, if you want to hop over to YouTube, I've got like a slideshow of all the different teams and all the different moves and everything else that's going on there. So you got some visual aids on that side that you don't really have on this side. So if you want to get more visual aids to what I'm talking about, jump over to YouTube and watch from there, because I've got a slideshow up with a bunch of different moves and transactions and stuff like that up. So that's for that. But we'll be on to the Dallas Mavericks very, very soon. And I did see Ty Southazine. I'm following that right now. So they're all developing some power in Blue Jays land. They drafted Chris Sinak, which, like, I'm not the biggest Chris Sinak guy in the world. I love the upside. And going into the draft, I said in a live, I think I might have said it with Rob, that like the perfect spot for him is Boston, right? Because they need the center depth and they need the big man depth, but they also need a big that can space the floor. And he's a long ways away from being a contributor, right? He's a great athlete with unbelievable tools, but there's a lot of process oriented stuff that needs development there, right? Same goes for Dylan Mitchell. I think Dylan Mitchell has like a really, really fun upside to be a rotation player in the NBA, but it's going to take some time. He's going to be in the G League a lot this year. Obviously, they lost Nick Vucevic, who signed with the Magic, and then they traded Jaylen Brown, so I'm going to preface this. Jaylen Brown is without question a significantly better basketball player than Paul George is at this point in his career. So let me just say that right out. I think the Boston Celtics did really well in that trade. Joe Mazzulla runs a Joe Mazzulla scheme 100% of the time, right? 100% of the time. And Kev asked a good question here, right? Joe Mazzulla's system is high 3-point values, right? There are some ways, again, this is not me saying he is a better player than Jaylen Brown. There are some ways that Paul George actually fits better with the Boston Celtics than Jaylen Brown did. Now there's a lot of ifs there about health and his ability to stay in the game and everything else. Jaylen Brown is a significantly better player at this point in his career than Paul George is. But I think Paul George is going to have a really good year if he can stay healthy, because I think the Mazzulla system and what he can provide, right? The defense is awesome. He did such a fantastic job on Jaylen Brown in the playoffs last year. The 3-point volume is going to be big. He doesn't necessarily need the ball to be productive because he's a great off-ball player. I think Paul George is going to be a sneaky great ad for this team. Again, Jaylen Brown is the better player. I'm not saying he's not. But I think people are sleeping on how productive Paul George can be in this situation going forward, right? So I think that's something that people need to understand is that I think Paul George in the Joe Mazzulla system actually fits very, very, very well. And for that question, somebody's asking who are some superstar players you could see getting moved at the end at the trade deadline. So it depends on what you consider a superstar, right? Like I think there's high valued, like high money players that could be traded at the deadline, right? Like I wouldn't be shocked if you saw an Anthony Davis moved or if you saw a DeMontis Sabonis or somebody like that. I don't think you're going to see the true superstars of the league moved, right? It'll be interesting to see, like, well, we'll get to Minnesota, but there's some stuff there where Minnesota, like, depending on how this goes, they could acquire somebody big. Maybe they have to trade out somebody that doesn't fit as well, depending on how it all goes. So there's a couple different ways you can look at these things. But I think that the Boston Celtics added some fun players, signed some great contracts, but traded away the most talented player in, arguably the biggest move of the offseason, maybe the second biggest move, depending on when we get to Raptors land here. I think the Boston Celtics get a B minus offseason, right? So I'm not as low on their offseason as other people. I think that the ad of Mitchell Robinson, I think bringing back Nimi Keita on basically a mid-level exception deal, I think that their draft was solid. I think they added in fun pieces. Mike Conley's not a guy that's going to play minutes for you, but like that's just like a perfect locker room guy for them. I think Tatum's going to be healthier. I like the balance of the roster in general. So I think they did well. Average offseason, B minus for the Boston Celtics. The Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets did some interesting stuff. So the Brooklyn Nets had an interesting offseason. So they re-signed Josh Minot. They re-signed Day'Ron Sharpe. I love the Day'Ron Sharpe signing. I think Day'Ron Sharpe is, if he is their starting center this year, I think he's going to have a great year. We'll see if he plays, 24 minutes or 28 or 30. We'll see what he gets to. But I've always thought that Day'Ron Sharpe is a player deserving of more role than he's been given. So I love that signing, and it's a very, very low money deal, all things considered. Keon Ellis is one of my guys. I think it's a great ad, especially since there's so many offensive on-ball players on this team. Grabbing Julius Randle, like I said, like it made sense for them to be able to bring him into their cap space at the end of the day. So I think it made sense to bring in Julius Randle, absorb him into the cap space. And then you have the potential where if he plays well, maybe you can move him for minor assets going forward. Adding Mo Wagner gives them kind of a front court wrinkle that's kind of fun. Where it falls down for me a little bit is in 2/3 of their draft, right? So Mikal Brown Jr., everybody knows I'm significantly lower on Mikal Brown Jr. than the majority of the people that do draft evaluations. I just think that it's such a wild card skill set. The decision making is such a wild card for me. For every unbelievable splash play, there's a decision that's made that is genuinely shocking, whether that be a pass or a defensive rotation or a shot that he decides to take. He has a very confusing game. He is one of the most talented guards I have evaluated in years. The decision making is a real problem, and he's about the only player I've evaluated that can give Darius Acuff a run for the concept of being the worst defender from a perimeter player that I've evaluated. So Mikal Brown's defense is genuinely horrific. Like in some ways, it's worse than Acuff. So he has the tools to be better than he is. He's got all the skills in the world to be a dynamic player. I just wonder how it leads to winning. And it's not the pick that I would have made at 6, right? So he would have been much lower on my board. So I'm going to dock them for that. Tyler Bilodeau at 43 is fun. I don't really see how he fits with them. I think there were better players available still. I think Bilodeau has the potential to be like a fun offensive player. There's real questions everywhere else on the court, but he's going to space it a little bit. He's going to have a highlight reel here and there. Him and Danny Wolf is like a really weird fit. If they ever play those two together, I don't think they can. But for all those statements, man, I love the Josh Jefferson pick at 28. I think Josh Jefferson at 28 is just a steal. He's just a good basketball player all the way around. He's just a really good basketball player. He's an unbelievable passer. I think the jump shooting is a little bit better than people give him credit for. I think he can self-create to a degree. Hyper smart defender. I just think that, especially with how many on-ball players they have between, Randall and Mikel Brown and obviously Michael Porter, and there's not a lot of ball to go around. And I think a guy like Josh Jefferson smooths out a lot of your problems because of how low maintenance his game is. So I love it. They traded away Nick Claxton for essentially nothing. And then Zaire Williams went to the Lakers, which I think is we'll talk about that, but no, we're not at Detroit yet. Can you guys see the screen and everything? Can you guys see the slideshow? It's going alphabetical. So I decided to do it alphabetical. So no Detroit yet. Detroit will be a fun conversation though. But yeah, no, Nick Claxton's like I said, Nick Claxton's a fun player. I don't think Nick Claxton's necessarily like a true starting caliber center on a winning situation. So we'll see if he can develop to that. But obviously, he's got limitations with his frame and other stuff, where I do have some concerns. But overall, the Brooklyn Nets, I would say that this is like a C minus. I think it's a C minus offseason. Like I didn't love their draft. I thought they were going to do more things with their cap space than they did. I thought they could have gotten something really in return for Claxton. I did like a couple of their free agent signings, but I'll say it's a C. It's a C. It's slightly below average, but I think they did make some good decisions. So slightly below average, but overall, I have no major issues with their offseason. I just think that their cap space could have been better utilized. We'll see what happens with Randall. We'll see what happens with some other pieces. But it's the draft that really lowers the grade for me as an overall. Yeah, well, Detroit's coming up soon, so you'll hear it very, very soon. The Charlotte Hornets obviously brought back Kobe White on I'd say a good contract for Kobe White. They added Grayson Allen, Dorian Finney-Smith, Royce White, and Naz Reid to their roster. On top of that, they added Heinz Steinbach, Christian Henderson, and Emmanuel Sharp. Wait, oh no, Emmanuel Sharp's not there. I don't know why that was added there. He's in Sacramento now. Um, Charles Lee wants to do the Missoula system, right? Lots of 3-point volume, lots of perimeter spacing, quick ball movement, all that kind of stuff. They added so many high-level shooters to their team for all the I get it. You traded away Miles Bridges, which I think is a addition by subtraction move. You traded away LaMelo Ball, which I think they're trading him at kind of his highest potential value. We even saw what that was. I think LaMelo is a really good player, and I think LaMelo was fantastic last year. Kobe White can do a good job in that lead guard role, especially since there's other guys on that team that can take some pressure off him as a creator. They have the high upside guy in Christian Anderson, where hopefully that works out. Hannes Steinbach, I just think, is fantastic. They had a really good draft, and I think that adding in Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, and Naz Reid gives them so much firepower on the perimeter. I think it's great. So they might take a step back this year. Like they may not be as good as they were in the second half of last season. I think they're realistic about that. But I love what they're doing. I think they're doing such a good job of setting up their organization. I think that they're making the moves that are necessary. I think they're doing all of the things that make sense for a team like this in a season where you trade away essentially two of your three best players. The idea that I'm giving a B plus offseason to them, I think will be shocking to some, but I love the direction of this team. I love their coach. I think that their roster is well constructed. I think that, like I said, they're young. They've got a vibrant play style. I think they're a really, really good basketball team, and I'm excited to see what they do going forward. Chicago Bulls, we're almost at your Detroit Pistons. We're almost at your Pistons there, Jack Cameron. Chicago Bulls, they were another one. I thought they had a weird offseason. Zach Collins extension didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but they wanted to keep him. Maybe he's great in the room. There's still some level of upside there, I guess. Adding Nick Claxton, I think, is a fun pickup. I think he fits with their whole slap method that Bryson Graham's kind of focusing on. They want their long athletic players. So Nick Claxton kind of fits that mold. Again, I have questions about him as a true center because he just doesn't defend bigs overly well, but it's fun. Getting Norm Powell, I think, is a good ad. As a perimeter scorer, he can space things out really well. He plays off Giddy, I think, really well. Caleb Wilson's a steal. I think Caleb Wilson's an absolute stud. That's just obviously them picking four, they knew they were going to get one of those top four guys. Getting Caleb Wilson, I think, is fantastic. I can't, say that openly enough. I think it's a great move. And I think it's, like I said, they were never going to go a different direction with that move. Caleb Wilson is so much more athletically dynamic than Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh was very like finesse oriented, right? He was very touch and feel oriented. Caleb Wilson is just such an athletic dynamo. I really didn't like the Dalen Swain pick. He's another guy that, for his offensive game to get off, he really needs the ball in hand. I don't think they have a lot of ball in hand reps to go around. I thought the defense 2 years ago was pretty good. I thought the defense last year was pretty bad. So I didn't love it. Cam Carr's sitting there. Cam Carr fits this team beautifully. He's still the long athletic guy, crazy athlete, but he spaces the floor beautifully and he plays off ball. So I thought that this was going to be the better decision. Them going Dalen Swain, I thought was clunky. I thought it's a clunky fit. It was not a fit that I liked at all. They lost Sexton, Anthony Simons, Mo Gay. No like massive losses like Sexton. I think we'll talk about him when we get to the Lakers one. We'll talk about Simons when we get to the Sixers. I think the overall roster construction of this team is confusing. I like what they're building for the most part. I think drafting Caleb Wilson kind of makes Noah Essengay expendable. I thought that they would try to move off of Essengay potentially, maybe try to package him together with like a Jalen Smith or something and see if you can get somebody to bite that still believes in the upside. But as an overall, like I didn't love their offseason. Like I don't hate it. You have to give it at least some credit because they added Caleb Wilson, who I'm massively high on. So I may give it a B-. I think it's an average offseason. If it wasn't for the Caleb Wilson pick, this would probably be a C or a C-. But they did get Caleb Wilson and they did get Norm Powell, who I like quite a bit. And so you got to give them the respect on that. And Cleveland Cavaliers now. Another one where it's just an offseason I really don't like. Like, I just really don't like this offseason. So, like, re-sign Thomas Bryant, re-sign Donovan Mitchell. That extension's scary. I think Donovan Mitchell's an unbelievable player. I don't know if I'd want to pay him that much money for that long. That's the reality. But you have to do it. You have to keep him in the house. I like the bones of the roster. Obviously, they haven't brought back Harden yet. We'll see. Their offseason is still incomplete for the most part. If they give James Harden more than $25 million a year, which like I wouldn't give James Harden $2 million a year, because again, I've talked about this in the past. I think the idea is winning a championship or resetting so you can build and win a championship. I don't think he helps you do either. I have a feeling they're going to sign him to way more money than anybody should feel comfortable signing him to at this point. So we'll see where that goes. But they added Mario Hezonja, which I think is a fun pickup. I think Mario Hezonja, when he left the NBA, couldn't shoot the basketball, and I think he shoots it pretty damn well now at this point, which is a big compliment. I think Mario Hezonja is going to be a fun player. On the defensive side, it's messy for him still, right? So they didn't have a pick. And then they lost Keon Ellis, Larry Nance, and Dean Wade. And I think people are really sleeping on how important Dean Wade was to this team. I think the role that Dean Wade played and the role that he filled was very, very critical for this team. And I think they are going to miss him a lot more than they think they're going to. And they did not replace him with somebody who can play that role. So Cleveland Cavaliers, I'll be on Miami pretty soon here. The Cleveland Cavaliers, it's a bad offseason. There's no two ways about it. It's ugly. I'll give this a D. I didn't like it whatsoever. So no real way to sugarcoat it. I did not think it was good. The Dallas Mavericks, and for my Detroit Pistons fan, we're almost there. We're almost at your Pistons. But the Dallas Mavericks, Moussa Cisse re-signed. The Najee Marshall extension, I've got mixed feelings because I really like Najee Marshall as a player. That's actually my Dalen Swain comp. Like, I think if Dalen Swain, like, pans out, I think Najee Marshall's, like, kinda who he is. So that's the hopes for Dalen Swain. But, like, I like Najee Marshall. Giving I didn't expect he was gonna get that much money. It's a little bit more than I would have felt comfortable with. Like, it's beyond the MLE, which is kinda crazy. They traded for Santi Aldama, Tarek Bavarovich, who again, like, I don't know what else Bavarovich is gonna do on the court other than shoot threes. But holy hell, as a standstill jump shooter, this is one of the best shooters in the world, guys. Like, I'm telling you right now, a lot of you guys don't know who he is. He is one of the best pure jump shooters on planet Earth on a catch and shoot, right? It's scary how well he shoots it. Can he defend? No. Does he pass? Not really. Can he self create? Not really. But man, he shoots the absolute shit out of the basketball. And there's a place for that. So maybe he can develop more of his game, but like they signed him to a 2-year deal after acquiring him. But it's a fun pickup because, man, the guy can really, really shoot the basketball. They grabbed Zachary Ricochet, which I think is a fun pickup. I think it's worth it for them. I think there's upside there as a shooter and potentially a defender. I was never high on the defense. Like I said, I was very low on Ricochet in his draft year. And then they grabbed Marcus Sasser, who I think is a fun pickup. Like the guy's just, he can go get a bucket at the end of the day. And I think he plays hard. Drafted Merez Johnson, who's a player that I love. I would have preferred them to draft Braden Burries here. I thought the Burries and Kyrie fit was essentially a perfect fit. Obviously with them getting Dusty May in, it makes sense that he would kind of pick one of his guys, and especially the leader of his team. But I would have preferred Burries, but like Merez Johnson, I was also super high on. Sergio De La Rey, I was also higher than consensus on. I think I had him ranked 19 or 20 in the draft class, so grabbing him at 25 was great. I had Merez Johnson, I believe, ranked 9 or 10. No, 10 in the class, I think. So it falls in line with that. So I think they've had to go. They lost Marvin Bagley to Denver, AJ Johnson, Chris Middleton, Ryan Nembhard. I have no problem with any of those losses, right? So Ryan Nembhard's a good player. They obviously need the guard depth. Brandon Williams is still on the free agent market if they really, really want to bring back another guard they're familiar with. But I think that getting Ricochet is worth the risk of losing Nembhard because I think Ricochet still does have that upside. Raptors seeding prediction, we'll get there. The Dallas Mavericks, I think they had a really good offseason at the end of the day. I think they had a good offseason. I would have loved to see them kind of be more creative in terms of getting to their timeline age. I think they're still a little bit mixed in terms of what they're thinking. So I can't give them like a unbelievable grade because I would like to see them get to, like the Clay stuff, the Gafford stuff, all these kind of things. Maybe a little bit less money for Najee Marshall. No, I wouldn't. Najee's not a fit for the Raptors because he needs the ball in his hands to be effective, and the Raptors have too many ball in hand guys as it is. But the Dallas Mavericks had a good offseason. I may give them I may give them a B offseason. I like their moves. No, B plus. We're gonna go B plus. It's right in between those two, but I'm gonna go B plus because I think that the upside swing on Ricochet is good. I think their draft was fantastic. They brought back players who are critical. They built some pretty significant depth, and I think Santi Aldama is a really good basketball player. I even like the Marcus Sasser pickup. I think Sasser's better than people give him credit for. Do you think Kyrie is on the block or should be if he's not? They want to keep him. I think Kyrie's a great player to have next to Cooper Flag as he's developing as like a lead dog, right? Because he's so good on ball, he's so good off ball, he can do a little bit of everything. He's so dynamic. If they could get multiple first round picks for Kyrie or something and a younger player, then you do it. But I think the idea of building up his value a little bit, letting Cooper Flag, be next to him for a little while, and then maybe depending on how it goes, dealing him off later in the year, those things can make a lot of sense for you. But yeah, we'll see. Denver Nuggets, as somebody who likes the Nuggets, this has been a frustrating offseason. Yeah, they brought back Tyus Jones. They brought back Spencer Jones. They added Marvin Bagley. I actually like the Alpha Diallo signing, and I like the Lonnie Walker signing. I think that they're fun pickups. Losing Tim Hardaway hurts. Trevin Brazil, bringing him in, I think was a good move in the second round. They just lack depth, and they're right up against it in terms of the aprons. They have no flexibility. They have really not much in the way of draft capital. It's going to be really, really, really hard for this team to improve. So they're going to have to take a step backwards, whether that is trading Cam Johnson for nothing, which is not what I would recommend because at the end of the day, he had a down year. He still shot 44% from three last year. Hopefully they're able to turn Christian Brown back into what we saw from Christian Brown 2 years ago, because if not, they're in trouble. That's the reality. Hopefully Aaron Gordon and Jokic and all these guys can stay healthy. If not, they're in trouble. It's going to be troublesome. They're back in the situation they were 2 years ago where they just had no depth. So it'll be interesting. They need a lot of young players to take massive steps, and I just don't see it from guys like Strother. I don't think Chris Boucher is going to sign Duke. He's significantly older than I think people realize he is. But yeah, so Denver Nuggets this offseason, I think this is a D plus. I think it's a D plus. I think they had a rough offseason. I think it's going to get rougher as we go. Maybe they'll pull off a stroke of genius. Maybe they won't, but it's not looking good, right? So yeah, no, and Jack, I agree. I've always liked Sasser. Something about those Houston guards I've always enjoyed. So they won't do it, man, but maybe what can you get for Murray or Gordon? I don't think they're going to. I think Gordon makes more sense to move, although I wouldn't move Aaron Gordon. I think he's a great player, but it's tough, man. There's a lot of money on those contracts. There's a whole lot of money on those contracts. It makes it really, really challenging. Oh, we have arrived. Jack is actually doing cartwheels right now. He's so happy to hear about this. We'll see how happy he is in about 3 minutes. The Pistons offseason has been weird. I think that's the biggest summary point I can give because it's a mixed bag. So Javonte Green, I thought bringing him back is a good idea. Kevin Huerter, I have no idea what the hell they were doing with that contract. Significantly better players got significantly less money and significantly less term. I have no idea why they did that deal with Huerter. It's not even high enough where I think it has a shit ton of trade value where you can build to a max deal. I think it's a bad deal. I think that is an F deal. I think that might be one of the worst. That might be the worst signing of the offseason because Kevin Huerter's been bad for a couple of years, and that's a whole lot of money for him. I don't understand that trade. All right, that signing. I understand the trade to an extent, but like that's re-signing him to that deal. I don't know how Kevin Huerter had that level of leverage. I don't know who else was giving Kevin Huerter that money. It doesn't make sense to me. Like 0 out of 10. And I'm a Trajan Langdon guy. He was one of my favorite players in college basketball ever. So it sucks that I have to criticize him. But John Collins, love it. I think John Collins is a great ad. Like, does he have as much self-creation as like Tobias Harris? No, but like he does a lot of other things. I think he spaces the floor super well. I think there's a potential for him to defend better than he has, despite the fact he's not like super young or anything. But like I do like the John Collins ad. I think it's great. Like losing Tobias Harris hurts, no question. Adding in Gary Harris, like, he's just gonna be an end of the bench guy. The Isaiah Joe signing I really like, which actually makes the Kevin Huerter signing worse, right? Trading for Isaiah Joe and having that Kevin Huerter contract on the books is just, it's so confusing. The Kevin Huerter thing is just so random. It's just I don't get it, and I don't know who's going to trade for that contract. Like that's the reality is I just don't know who's going to trade for that contract. Taurean Prince is just like I said, he might provide a little bit here and there, but like you're not asking for a whole lot from Taurean Prince. Trading up for Emeka Ibuka, essentially losing Isaiah Stewart to move up 5 picks, I think is terrible, especially when you don't have Duren locked up. We'll see what the Duren stuff is. There's talks about him taking the $9.6 million qualifying offer. I don't think for a damn second he's going to do that. But like if he decides to, like, congratulations, you made an awful financial decision. And, it is what it is. But the Ibuka Corey pick, I like Ibuka Corey as a player. My issue is that you really can't play him with Dennis Jenkins. And so you're kind of putting yourself into a situation where you've got these two guys who both have the potential to be really, really good players for you. And they can't be on the court at the same time, but they're also not really starters. So that's confusing to me. I thought when they were moving up, they were going to go a different direction. But Corey's a excellent player. I just don't love the fit in Detroit necessarily. Like it's tricky, and I don't love the fit with him and Cade Cunningham necessarily. I don't love the fit with him and Dennis Jenkins necessarily. It was all very confusing. Obviously, they lost Tobias Harris, which will hurt them. Karis LeVert, that is what it is. Moving off him made sense. Marcus Sasser, he wasn't going to get an opportunity to play for this team. And the Isaiah Stewart trade, I just think is all sorts of bad. Depending on what happens with Jalen Duren, and the reality is maybe Jalen Duren, maybe they lock him up to a $40 million per year or $38 million. Maybe he finally agrees to it. Maybe they do a shorter term deal, 2 or 3 years, and he goes for a higher AAV, like 42 to 45 million. There's no chance somebody's going to give him the max. They're not giving him the max. I think it's too late in the process to get a trade worked out. So that's kind of where you're at. You're kind of just sitting on those players right now. Overall, as an offseason, it's a C minus. It's a C minus, and like honestly, it could be a D plus. We'll see what happens with Duren. I may be confident that they're going to get Duren done with the deal that makes sense for them, which is still more money than I'd pay Duren, to be fair. But I'll say it's a C minus. I do like the Pistons, but this has been a confusing offseason where I had really high hopes that they were going to do bigger things. So sorry, Jack. I apologize for hurting your feelings with that one, although it seems like maybe you agree with me on a lot of it. Golden State Warriors, trust me, it's not getting better here. Got Charles Bassey, bring back Draymond, Al Horford, Melton, Peyton, Porzingis. They didn't add anybody outside through the draft where they got Yaxel Lendeborg, which I think Lendeborg's a great fit for this team. I think he's an awesome player. I think he'll be great for them. Losing Quentin Post for nothing. Quentin Post isn't a great player by any means, but he's essential when your center rotation is Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis. Having that third center is really, really important. I think losing him is going to hurt them a little bit more than they think it's going to. It's a really good piece of work by Memphis. Really creative signing with a higher AAV and then no future guarantees to be able to kind of steal him away. I love the Lendeborg ad. It's the only thing keeping this from being an F. It's the only thing keeping it from being an F, because I think Yaxel is really, really, really good. He's going to play a very specific role for them. Obviously, they were selling out for LeBron James. They were hoping that LeBron James was going to come in and save them. Him picking Philadelphia buried their offseason. They're just running it back with an older team who has a lot of injury issues. I don't like it at all. I really like Yaxel, so I won't be too rough, but it's a D. It's a D offseason for me. They need to rebuild. Yeah, so Kev, I'm with you, dude. Yeah, I just saw this pop up. They need to rebuild, man. And I agree. I know Steph wants to be a one organization guy, and I get that, and I respect that. And if he wants to stay there for forever, that's his prerogative, and they should honor that. But like reality says, just trade him to the Raptors for the other 2 first-round picks, and, we'll give you Barrett and Quickly and 2 picks, and we'll take them on after the Kawhi deal gets done. How about that? Do we work that out? Yeah, well, and I listen. So, Bryce Simon is one of my favorite, basketball analysts. I really like Bryce. I talk to Bryce on Twitter and stuff sometimes. We'll message each other once in a while, and I think Bryce is fantastic. Like I said, I do kind of focus on Pistons because I do like the Pistons. They're not my favorite team or anything, but I do like the Pistons. But I watch more Pistons-based content than I probably should be. But yeah, so it was a weird offseason for them. Yeah, and that's what it is, man. These orgs put themselves in really tough spots when they wait even a year or two long. 100%, man. 100% they do. And it's tough because it's tough to thread that needle. But the whole idea, the second they started talking about it 5 years ago or wherever it was with the 2 timelines, the second a team starts talking about 2 timelines, I just immediately know that it's not going to go very well. Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, 10,000 likes on it. That's sick. Appreciate it, guys. Are these all my friggin' players in here? These fucking weirdos. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. But yeah, no, Bryce Simon's fantastic the way he does. I think he's a great draft evaluator. So I've got a lot of respect for the guy. These guys, all my players are in the chat pumping me up on TikTok now. You guys should be doing yoga or something, just to let you know. I see a couple of you in here that should probably be doing yoga. DeMarcus. Houston Rockets next. It's another one. I think it feels incomplete at the end of the day. I think it feels incomplete. Um, bring back Isaiah Crawford, re-sign Tari Eason. I think the Tari Eason deal is spectacular. Like getting him at that low of a number, I think is a coup. Jayshawn Tate, bring him back. Like that just makes sense as a culture piece. Losing a Koji, bringing in Marcus Smart, that's an upgrade. Getting rid of the Dorian Finney-Smith contract, which was prohibitive in general, bringing in Bogdan Bogdanovic is it's a fun offensive ad if he can shoot the ball at all this year. And like the reality is we haven't seen him shoot the ball at a high level in a very long time. It's been a few years. The injury problems have really come in and affected things. I think the Marcus Smart ad's very good. We'll see what happens with some of their depth pieces, and we'll see kind of what happens with the backside of their roster. I think adding Bruce Thornton, I'm a huge Bruce Thornton guy. I think that adding Bruce Thornton was a big get for them. I think he can come in and be an adult and play right away, which is fun. Is Durant moved at some point? Somebody asked earlier about if there's a superstar trade that you could see happening in the long run, blah, blah, blah. Durant might be one of those guys, man. Maybe Durant could make sense as a potential move, but we'll have to play it by ear and see. Oh, I didn't give a grade. Houston Rockets, it's honestly, there's not much of a grade. I like the idea they go off to Dorian Finney-Smith. I think they upgraded Smart over Okogie. I think Bogdan just is, at the end of the day, he's just a guy at the end of the bench. Tari Eason deal was spectacular, and I thought Bruce Thornton was really good. So I actually like their offseason a lot more than a lot of people do. So I'll actually say that this is a there's no massive move, but there was some cost certainty. I think that the Marcus Smart deal is one of the better deals signed in the offseason. So I'm actually going to say this offseason was a B+, which is going to be higher than the majority of people. But I really think that Tari Eason deal being so affordable, at like $16 million a year, ends up saving them so much money long term. Getting Marcus Smart 2 years, $12 million, I think is a great signing. Moving off that Dorian Finney-Smith money is really good. I do not like the construction of this roster, but I did think that the offseason as a whole was quite good. So that's where we're at for that. Indiana Pacers. Did they re-sign anybody? No. Did they draft anybody? No. Not really. They brought in Larry Nance. They brought in Kelly Oubre. I think Kelly Oubre is actually like a really fun ad for this team. But let's be real. We know what their ads are. We know that their ads are Tyrese Halliburton, and we know that it's a full season of Vitsa Zubats and health and all of this stuff. Trading out Larry Nance and Kelly Oubre, or getting them and trading out Cam Jones and Micah Potter, it's a huge upgrade. I think Kelly Oubre is going to be good for these guys. It's a boring offseason, but it's an offseason that made sense. They didn't have to do a whole lot. Losing out on the 5th pick, that sucks. It is what it is. I think they probably would have moved off of it anyways. But I think this is a B-. I think it's the high end of average. They didn't do a whole lot, but they upgraded around the edges. So I'll give the Pacers the credit that they deserve on that. I thought that there was some smart moves here, but as a whole, you're getting Halliburton back. You're adding to the team that way. And this is already a very, very, very deep roster. So I think they did a good job, working around the margins and the edges. Where are we at now? The LA Clippers. Now we can start to talk about the Toronto Raptors, LA Clippers fiasco that's going on right now, because that's going to be part of the whole process here. So re-sign Jordan Miller, re-sign Kobe Sanders. I like both those deals. Added Janai Broom, which is, let's just be real, that was just to acquire an additional 2nd-round pick. The Rui Hachimura signing, I think, is awesome. I think that's a really good grab. It's kind of neutralized by the losing of John Collins. They're different players, but obviously, he's going to bring back some of what Collins did and space the floor in a similar-ish way. Trading Kawhi Leonard for Brandon Ingram and Grady Dick is hilarious to me. I know you're getting the picks, the 2 firsts and 2 seconds potentially. If this is the way that the deal was made up, there's no, just talent for talent. It's a really, really rough trade. Kawhi Leonard, you will find very few people who are lower on Brandon Ingram and Grady Dick than I am, to be fair. So I will be just fully transparent and honest on that. I do not have a high level of appreciation for either of their games. So moving off of them, I believe they're both negative assets. Um, so trading 2 negative assets, 2 potentially middling first round picks, and 2 seconds to get a guy who was arguably a top 5 player in basketball for the last 3 quarters of the season last year, who has familiarity with the organization, I think is just a phenomenally bad trade for them. Drafting Keaton Wagler, I'm lower on Wagler. I think Wagler is an off-ball guard at the end of the day. Some people have blown up on me about this, same way that people did about Trey Johnson last year, where I said he was an off-ball guard, not a primary on-ball scorer, and people gave me hell about that, and then I was proven to be correct. Keaton Wagler, I think, is somebody who can play on ball, and if everything clicks 100% and he turns into Devin Booker, fantastic. The reality is, I think he's a really fun off-ball scorer who's always reminded me of Richard Hamilton a lot. So I do like the idea of the comp with like Richard Hamilton. I don't think he's as physical as Richard Hamilton. Richard Hamilton was skinny, but he was tough. But it's Kevin Martin. Kevin Martin's always who he's reminded me of. He's a better passer than Kevin Martin. I think Kevin Martin's a slightly better creator. But that's where it's at. Mathurin hasn't been done yet. So Mathurin has not been done yet. There are rumors, but we'll see. I think Kawhi will be in Toronto. So I am pretty confident that Kawhi will be in Toronto next year. Good question, Camilla. Camilla. I'm gonna butcher that name. I apologize ahead of time. But overall, it's a bad offseason. Like, I would have went different directions with the draft. My draft board obviously looks different than a lot of people's draft boards. I hated the Kawhi trade for them. I liked some of the signings around the edges, like Hachimura as a replacement for Collins. Like, I get all that. As an overall, it's a bad offseason. It's a C minus. No, you know what? No, it's a C minus because they added Wagler, and even despite being lower on Wagler, he is a very, very good basketball player. So I do like that adds, but it's a C minus overall for the Clippers. I didn't like their offseason, and I question where their overall direction is headed at the end of the day. So that's a problem for me. That's a problem for me. Los Angeles Lakers. This one's super fun. This is one of the ones that I'm actually really excited to talk about because the reality is they made so many moves and there's so many layers to the moves that they made that it's actually a bit overwhelming at times. So they brought back Austin Reeves on a big time deal. I think a deal that's well deserved for him. They drafted my guy, Cam Carr, who I just think is fantastic. I just think he's a fantastic player. He's not an on-ball guard or anything like that, but as an off-ball guard, like I think he's just fantastic. I love the way he plays basketball. I love how tenacious he is as a player, the shooting, the athleticism, everything else. So I think that's at 24, I just think it's supreme value on that pick. Added Quentin Grimes for more money than I would have given Quentin Grimes, but he's a good player, right? Jaden Hardy, that's just a throw in. Added Kevon Looney, which I think is just a good depth add. Sandro Mamakhelishvili, which everybody knows how I feel about Sandro and how good I think Sandro is. I think right now Sandro is their starting 4, which is very fun. I think that's very, very fun, especially with Walker Kessler being behind him, being able to kind of insulate some of the issues. Colin Sexton on a 2-year deal. I think Colin Sexton plays his ass off, and I think he's a good basketball player. Added Zaire Williams, which is like I said, it's an upside on a guy who can shoot a little bit and defend. Matisse Thybulle is a signing I loved. So he was somebody that I was talking about the Toronto Raptors signing all offseason because I just think for what he does on that low of a contract, I think he provides fantastic value despite the injury concerns and everything else. And then the big one is obviously Walker Kessler. So I love Walker Kessler. I think he's a great player. I do think that the Lakers overpaid for him, but they got their guy. Right. Sometimes you have to pay a premium, right? Minnesota Timberwolves probably overpaid for Rudy Gobert. He has been the backbone of that defense and a critical piece, despite my feelings towards Rudy Gobert. It's an overpay, but it's an overpay that made sense and has continued to make sense as that team has developed. It's gotten them to multiple Western Conference Finals, right? So we'll be on the Timberwolves soon. And if people want to see the visual aids, hop over to the YouTube side because YouTube, I have a slideshow and everything going on right now that you can see through there. So if you want to follow me on YouTube, go jump over because that's where more of the visual aid stuff is that's going on. But I'm going through the league alphabetically right now. So we're about halfway through. We will need to speed up slightly. Overall, like I said, they lost Ayton, which I thought was fine. Hachimura, which, hurts them a bit for sure. Jackson Hayes, LeBron James, which it's a tough guy to lose. Obviously, it's LeBron James, right? So, but they were looking to change directions. So at a certain point, it made sense to go that route. Luke Kennard and Marcus Smart are bigger losses than people think, and two guys who were signed to absolutely great deals this offseason. So I'm a bit surprised they weren't able to keep one or both of them, because they seem to fit. And beyond that, the contracts that they signed were low. They were low at the end of the day. And I agree with you completely. Carr was a phenomenal pick. Overall, I really like the offseason. I get it. They overpaid for a couple free agents. They overpaid for Walker Kessler, but I think that the talent they got back was awesome. I think this team's in pretty good shape. And I think that the roster makes a lot of sense around Luka Doncic. So I'm higher on this offseason than most people. I would give the Lakers offseason a B. It would be like an A minus if it wasn't for the overpays. Like, I just think Quentin Grimes for that much money is a lot of money for Quentin Grimes. Like, Sandro for that amount of money end term it's a big investment, right? It's a big investment, right? So, but other than the contract values being too high, I love their offseason. It's just that's the only thing holding them back to a B for me. We'll be going alphabetically. So we're at the Lakers right now, the Los Angeles Lakers right now. Suns will be up in a little bit. And like I said, for the TikTok people, if you want to see the visual aids that I provided, hop over to the YouTube side. Hop over to the YouTube side. Watch me over there. And if you have specific questions and you want to support the channel and support the stuff that I'm doing, feel free to send in a super chat, get a membership. Things like that are huge for me growing the channel more than it has already grown, which has been a ton recently. And I appreciate all the support. So if you guys want to join me over on the YouTube side, please do, because I've got a fun little slideshow going on that gives you a visual reference for everything that's going on this NBA offseason. All right, Memphis Grizzlies, another one that I really, really like their offseason. So drafted Cam Boozer, like start off right there. The Cam Boozer ad is huge. People want to talk a certain level of shit about Cam Boozer, and that's fine. They can. You're going to sound foolish when you do at the end of the day. The kid's an awesome player, and he just does a little bit of everything, and I think he fits so well with Edey and Coward and the pieces that they've added to that team and the young core that they've developed. I think moving off of Ja Morant, even though they didn't get much in terms of return, but I think moving off him's the right thing. I think it's been overdue. I'm glad they did it. Buying out KCP made sense because you want to give the young guys a chance to play. Santi Aldama trade, like they got solid asset return in that trade. So I actually thought that trade overall was really good. Karim Lopez, I was significantly lower on, but he makes sense for them. I thought they were going to go a different direction. I thought they were going to go center. I thought they were going to try to grab another center at that spot. They decided to go with Karim Lopez. I'm lower that on Karim than most, but it's an upside swing. And like Karim does have really good upside. It's just like, I don't know how functional it's going to be, but I think you're putting him in a great environment for him to have the opportunity to maximize the things that he does. So overall, they had Jeremy Grant, they had A.J. Johnson, Chris Murray, Quentin Post, which was a great piece of business, high AAV first year, no guarantees beyond that. They stole him. And in one of the biggest thefts of the offseason, getting Isaiah Stewart for essentially nothing. For Detroit moving up 5 picks. I just think that the value of that is unbelievable. Isaiah Stewart's such a big ad for them. Like I said, they filled out their center depth. And it makes a lot of sense now, post-draft, post-free agency and trade, why they didn't go center with their second first-round pick, because they've done such a good job of filling that since. But yeah, I think the Isaiah Stewart ad is unbelievable, especially since, like, obviously there are questions about Zach Edey and his ability to stay healthy, everything else. But a great piece of work. Memphis Grizzlies offseason, obviously you're adding in a player like Cam Boozer. You're moving to a new generation of your team by moving off Ja Morant. Really, really buying into the young talent, adding in some veteran leadership and some toughness and all of that stuff. I think that they're as nasty as they were in previous eras of this team. I love the makeup of this team. I consistently just agree with the decisions that they're making, and I think this is an A offseason. It's an A. I think that everything they did was really, really solid, and they're going to have expiring contracts worth a whole lot of money right when some of these guys start to get expensive. So I thought it was a fantastic offseason for Memphis. The Miami Heat. Obviously, this is the big one. This is in terms of big moves that are made in the offseason, this is a big one, right? And I'm talking about re-signing Simone Fontecchio. No, so bringing back Fontecchio, getting Wiggins on the extension. I think those are good pieces of business. But at the end of the day, um, you know, signing Tim Hardaway Jr. as well, really, really good piece of business. He was critical for the Denver Nuggets last year, and I think that he's a great ad for this team. But they added Giannis Antetokounmpo. They added Bobby Portis in one of the biggest trades we've seen in several years. And the guys that they traded away, I'm not overly high on, right? So I'm not a Tyler Hero guy. I think Yakashonis is going to be a fine enough bench guard. Jaime Jaquez is going to need to be paid in 12 months. And I don't think that's going to be cheap for wherever he ends up because I don't think he ends up in Milwaukee long term. And then Khalil Ware, who I'm lower on because of the functional play. From a fantasy sports side, I totally understand the Khalil Ware love. I will draft him higher than most people in a fantasy draft. If you're trying to win basketball games, I've got major concerns about how he defends. But like I digress. They lost a lot, but they gained the man, right? They gained Giannis, and again, getting Bobby Portis in that deal, I think, is also super helpful. And then adding the players that they did and Tim Hardaway, I think it's critical. So they did a really, really good job in this trade. I don't know how the roster construction works year one. I think it takes about 12 months to adjust to Giannis anyways. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. They're really leaning on the idea that Bam can shoot it long term, which like I think Bam can shoot it functionally enough to get defended. But you added Giannis Antetokounmpo. So, do I want necessarily be the team that's on the hook for the next Giannis extension? No, not necessarily. But they went out and they got a guy and they got one of the best players in basketball, and hopefully he can stay healthy. And they added some fun pieces around him, and it's a really good piece of work. And I don't think they gave up too much to get him. Miami Heat offseason, I may give it an A minus. No, I may give it an A. You got Giannis Antetokounmpo. You can't give it below an A, I don't think, especially when I'm saying that you didn't give up all that much to get him, like comparatively. So, really great offseason for Miami, and I'm going to be intrigued to see how it all works out. And yeah, Kev, this team's going to be super interesting to watch all season. It's going to be a really, really interesting thing because their roster construction just makes no sense, but tons of sense at the same time. The Milwaukee Bucks brought back Usman Jang on a really, really fun contract. Getting Bogo Markovic on a deal is interesting. Pete Nance, bringing him back. Gary Trent on the worst, let's be real. It's just a horrific contract. I know it was probably preordained and everything else, but like it's just a terrible contract. It's just a terrible contract. You can't sign Gary. Gary Trent's not worth that yearly salary in 1 year right now. He's just not very good. That's the reality of the situation. Bringing in Hero and Yakashonis, Jaquez, Karis LeVert, Khalil Ware, I think it's all fine. Their draft, Braden Burries at 10, I think is an absolute steal. Everybody knows that I had Braden Burries ranked at 5 in this draft class. I love him. I think he's fantastic. I just think he's genuinely just an unbelievable basketball player. So that's a steal. Nate Amon, I get the upside swing. I don't love Nate Amon as a prospect, but I understand the upside swing of it. So I'm not going to dock them too hard for that. I would have preferred to see them, draft like a bunch of players that I would have had ranked higher than Nate Amon, but like the Burries pick is great. I think they had to move on from Giannis. It's still a bad offseason at the end of the day. They got a steal in Burries. They tried to do some fun things. Their roster doesn't make any sense. I feel like they're probably going to end up losing Ryan Rollins, which is going to be a killer for them. So maybe it makes more sense to trade him sooner rather than later. At the end of the day, you lost a star player. You lost the face of your franchise. I can't grade you high, despite how much I like Braden Burries. It's a D plus offseason for the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll get to Melo and the Wolves very soon here. Oh, look at that. Minnesota Timberwolves up next. Minnesota Timberwolves obviously had a busy offseason, right? Jalen Clark re-signed, Ayo Dosunmu re-signed, Bones Highland comes back for the minimum, which I think are all great. I think bringing Ayo back, some people think it's too much money. It might be. But he's a good player. He fits there and he's very, very versatile. They added LaMelo Ball. They added Josh Green. They got Mo Gay, and they brought back Trey Lyles, which I think is like a sneaky good signing. They got rid of Kyle Anderson, Mike Conley, Julius Randle, and Nas Reed. I think that they are leaning into the idea that Yohan Berger can really, really play at this level. And they might be right because, like, I think Yohan Berger is very, very good, but you need him to be very, very, very good. And you have to pray that Rudy Gobert stays healthy, which has not been a problem in his career, but he is aging. There are holes in the depth of this team. There are very clear holes in their depth. They have very limited opportunities to be able to move things to gain more assets to fill those holes. They are walking on a razor's edge with a lineup construction that hopefully works out. The reality is having a core of LaMelo and Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels. There's a lot of wild cards there personality wise. Who knows? Maybe it will end up being just one of those super fun, high intensity kind of, let's say sound biteable teams, or maybe it ends up being a disaster, right? And there's a lack of focus and there's a lack of direction and everything else. Who knows? I think that they acquired great talent. I think they gave up a lot of front court depth to do it. They need this trade to work out. Like, they need it to work out, and I have no idea if it's going to. I think that LaMelo Ball has a very long history of injuries and very long, history of inconsistent play. There are concerns there, but him not having to be the lead guy is it going to be beneficial? Is he going to like that? He showed growth maturity wise on court last year. Like, I do have some faith in it. At the end of the day, I don't know if it's a good season. I don't know if it's a bad season. I'm going to have to say it's a B minus. They got a talented player, so I'll give them the high end of the average off season. But like, man, I tell you, if there was a Hard Knocks show for the NBA, oh, Kev, right on cue. He says, speaking of locker rooms, that'd be, I would love to watch that on TV. Yeah, so would I. It's must see TV, absolutely. But so we're gonna go B minus for the draft grade because I like the talent, but I worry about the construction, right? I'm not even gonna give this a rundown. They did nothing. It's an F. It's an F. The one thing they did do, they screwed up giving DeAndre Jordan. It says 1 year here, but it's actually a 2-year full guarantee. So they didn't even get the veterans exemption back, where it would have saved them $1.5 million if they would have signed to a 1-year deal. Everything about their offseason is stupid. This is a bad basketball team that the roster makes no friggin' sense, and they decided to run it back. Terrible. I say all the time that Troy Weaver is the worst general manager in all of professional sports. He proved it again this offseason. Terrible job. Terrible job. Sitting on your hands is not an approach to leadership. It's an F offseason. If I could give it a lower grade than F, I would. I hate everything about it. I hate the roster construction. I love some of the players, but like at a certain point, you need to decide. It's very clear that Zion Williamson and Derek Queen cannot play together. It's very, very clear that you don't really have any regard for Yves Missi. It's very, very clear that right now Trey Murphy's value is at an all-time high. Every player that's going to touch the basketball court for this team outside of Herb Jones needs the basketball in their hands to be good at basketball. And there's only one on the court last time I checked. F minus offseason, terrible roster construction. Troy Weaver, how do you keep getting jobs in the sport? Joe Dumars, I could say the same thing about you. Terrible, terrible. From a team that I liked so much a few years ago, but this is what happens when you hire such a dog shit general manager. Thoughts on Jeremiah Fears? I think he's fun. I compared him to Monte Ellis coming out of the draft, and I think that's what he is. I think he's a guy that's going to be like an awesome bench scorer. I don't trust the decision making. I don't trust the defense. I don't trust the shooting. So can he develop those? Absolutely. But Monte Ellis, it's not an insult to call him Monte Ellis. Like, I think that he's a great athlete. I think he's a great on-ball player, and I don't think that he is going to be in a position where this lineup makes any sense to accentuate the things that he does well and kind of insulate the things that he does poorly. So Troy Weaver, you're terrible at your job, and I hope you hear this. Yeah. Oh, what is the veterans exemption? So basically, if somebody has a certain amount of years played and you sign them to a 1-year minimum contract, the NBA will actually rebate you $1.5 million. So instead of being a 3.87 million cap hit, it actually drops your cap hits like $2.37 million. So it saves you against the aprons. And it's the only move they made all off season, and they still fucked it up. So it's crazy to me. I like I said, Troy Weaver's terrible at his job. That front office is a joke, but I digress. The New York Knicks, reigning NBA champion, New York Knicks, which is weird to say. It still is weird to say that. Brought back Alvarado, brought back Clarkson, brought back Diawara, brought back Shamit. I thought all of those deals were good deals. Lost Hook Party, lost Mitchell Robinson, Sohan. Everybody knew that was going to happen. You lost your center depth, all of it, and you brought in Andre Drummond. I am not a believer in Andre Drummond. I don't think you can play him in the playoffs at all. I don't know what they're doing with their center rotation at this point. You know, I don't know. He doesn't defend. He doesn't like. I get it. Maybe he just turns into wanting to be a spot up jump shooter in the corner. I don't necessarily agree. But yeah. What is this? Yeah, I'll check that out. But yeah, no, I think, like I said, they brought back some good guys. They need to make a decision on Deuce McBride because Deuce is gonna get too expensive for them. They're gonna have to move off him. Their draft I thought was weird. Like Jack Kyle is kind of fun, and Tyler Nickel, I think he can shoot at the very least, but I don't think either of them are ready to play in the NBA. So I think they kind of firebombed all of their center depth, brought in a worse center, and then just recycled the same roster. So like I've like again, the breeding NBA champions. They're a great team. But I think that at the end of the day, he is somebody, or they are a team that got worse this offseason. They got worse. Now, again, they're still a great basketball team. I don't think this is going to crush them as a franchise or anything. But like, they really, really need to figure out their center depth, and maybe they can move Miles McBride and move up from there and find it. But I do not like this offseason. I'm going to say their offseason is a C minus. C minus for the Knicks. Oklahoma City Thunder did a bunch of stuff, had to move money, had to invest in the young guys. Hartenstein deal is great. Kenrich Williams coming back on a lower number. I think that makes a lot of sense. Moved off of Brendan Carlson, which I thought was interesting. Dort, which it was good that they could move off from. I know a lot of people thought they get a first round pick for him. I wasn't shocked that the return was lower. Moved Isaiah Joe, moved Aaron Wiggins. It was guys that going in the offseason, you can check back on my, a couple lives that I did where I said those three players specifically would be moved. So this was logical sense. They had to do it to alleviate some of the pressure against the Aprons. Drafting a Daimara, I think is fine. They have 39 centers on their roster, so I don't know if it makes the most sense, but they got a guy who can pass and be super large and all this kind of stuff. The people that are saying Wemby stopper and all this just don't understand the mechanisms of basketball very well. So that's tricky. Bennett Sturts, I'm lower on. Sorry to Rob, like Pencer basketball. He's gonna be unhappy that I'm talking about Bennett Sturts in negative light. I just thought there was better players on the board, and I thought there was opportunities for them to get a big wing that they so desperately needed. Hence why they tried to steal away Spencer Jones. They have so many guards on their team. I just don't see how Bennett Sturts fits with this roster. They have so many centers on the team, but like Mara at least is a different type of center than those other guys. So I'm fine enough with Mara at 12. I think I had Mara at 14 on my board. Sturts, like I said, at 16, it's not far from where I had him. I think I had him at 19 or 20. It's just the fit's weird. And he's an older player, so you kind of want him to play immediately, but he's not better than any of the guards that they have, right? So he's not going to play ahead of AJ Mitchell or Cason Wallace or Shea Gilgeous-Alexander or Jared McCain. Like he's not better than these guys. So and he's a very, very on ball based player. So I don't know how this works long term. Especially at the age that he is, I thought it was a weird move. Often when Oklahoma City trades back in for a first round pick, it doesn't go well though. Dylan Jones, Jang was another trade in. Like they haven't done great with their trade ins. So yeah, unbelievable front office, but that's like the one kind of sore spot they have. Yeah, I think that Cason Wallace is an absolute stud. I would give up almost anything for Cason Wallace to be a Toronto Raptor. So I'm still sore about that draft that he didn't fall to them. So yeah, Orlando Magic, weird year for them. Because like, brought back Javon Carter, Jonathan Isaac, added Nick Vucevic and lost Mo Wagner. I think Mo Wagner is better than Nick Vucevic at this point. Fired their coach, who, like I said, deserved to be fired. Terrible offensive coach. So you're thinking they're going to go out and be like, you know what? The problem with this team was the offensive system and structure was not good. We need to get somebody in here that's going to be an offensively dynamic coach and really coach up the offense. And so who do they bring in? One of the more well-respected defensive coaches in the NBA, right? Like Sean Sweeney is like a defense first guy. Now, that's not to say he can't have an offensive structure, but like it's just weird because he must have interviewed so well, because like he has been like a defensive guy on coaching staffs for forever now. That's what he's known for, is being a defense guy. So maybe he's got some dynamic offensive systems too, which is entirely possible. But there's a real good chance that, like I said, we'll have to wait and see. But this team needs somebody who can really, really organize their offense, because, like I said, the talent on the roster is fantastic. Does the talent on the roster all make sense together? Not necessarily, right? So, uh, we'll see if he's the guy to kind of bring enough nuance to this offense where they can get more freed up looks, and it's less your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, which is kind of what they did last year. So I don't like the offseason for them as an overall. I thought there was gonna be more movement than this. You can't kill them though. It was just inactive. So I'll say it's a C minus, because I thought they were gonna do some things that could make more sense, but overall didn't do a whole lot of anything. C minus for the Orlando Magic. Philadelphia 76ers. Do I need to really run? It's an A plus. I hate the Sixers. They're my least favorite basketball team. They have been my entire life. I can't stand them. And they had an A plus offseason at the end of the day, right? Acquired Jalen Brown, got KCP, who I think is going to be a fun piece of them. Ariel Hookporty, who I genuinely think is better than Andre Drummond. They got LeBron James. They brought in Anthony Simons. They brought in Dean Wade, which I think that's just a super underrated deal. They lost, Janai Broom, Andre Drummond, Paul George, Quentin Grimes, Kelly Oubre, Dalen Torrey. They literally upgraded on each of those players. They drafted LeBaron Philon as well, which I think Philon at 22 is a great value. It's not necessarily the pick I would have made positionally. But like I do like the player an awful lot, so it makes sense. I don't think you need to go great depth. You get LeBron James on a minimum, and you bring in Jalen Brown for what they got him for. The lineup construction, it's gonna be a bit funky. Does it stunt VJ Edgecombe's development a little bit? Maybe. Does it take the ball out of Tyrese Maxey's hands a little bit more than it should? Maybe. Can Joel Embiid stay healthy? Probably not. But just based off the moves that happened in the offseason, it's an A plus offseason. I hate to say it. It kills me to say it, but that's the reality. A plus offseason for the Philadelphia 76ers. Phoenix Suns. Somebody was asking about the Phoenix Suns earlier, so let's talk about the Phoenix Suns again. Re-signed Dylan Brooks, which I think is a good contract. Dylan Brooks annoys the shit out of me, but I think at the end of the day, he's a good player. Brought back Colin Gillespie on a really good deal. Jordan Goodwin on a really good deal. Mark Williams on a fair deal. Traded for Miles Bridges, which I think was a terrible trade. I don't care if he is a slightly better player than the people they gave up. I think trading for him and giving up the amount of shooting that they did, I think it's a negative value. Also, I just wouldn't want Miles Bridges anywhere near my franchise. Obviously, there are college ties between Miles Bridges and Matt Ishbia that makes sense. Luke Kennard is a great signing. Great value. Like I said, I understand why they were able to give up Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal. Miles Bridges is just not a player that I'd want anywhere near my organization. So I'm going to rate this lowly just based off that. And then drafting Koa Pete, which I think is a good pick. I think it's a fun pick as well to kind of pair with a unique, interesting young front court that includes my guy, Rasheer Fleming, as well. And Common Malawatch. And I think Oso Ighodaro now is a bit redundant. So maybe they look to move off Oso at some point. Like, who knows? But overall, I think it's a really good offseason for them, with the exception of the Miles Bridges deal, which I think is an absolute flaming bag of dog shit. I still don't see the future regarding the Suns. They don't need to blow it up. And or they need to blow it up and give Devin a chance to win. Yeah, they'll never trade Devin Booker, but like I fully agree. I think that I would have been trying to rebuild this team, especially with the lack of draft capital that they have going forward. That's the move that I would have been making. And then I said that last year, and Phoenix Suns fans are very, very emotional group of people, so they were not happy about it. But that's the reality. Overall, I like the majority of the moves. I think the majority of the things that they did were really good. I think the Miles Bridges deal is absolute dog shit. I may give them a C off season because of it. Because, like, honestly, I think that a couple good moves, but your primary big move of the off season, you know what? C plus. We'll give them C plus, not C, because I do like the re-signings for the most part. But the Miles Bridges deal, I don't understand it at all. I do not understand that deal at all. So, but like Ishbia and him have the ties. So it is what it is. Portland Trailblazers, weird. Re-signed Robert Williams, awesome. Brought in Brendan Carlson. Okay, player I like quite a bit. Traded for John Morant, which is very strange because now they have 34 guards on their roster. All of them are expensive or about to be expensive. So I don't understand what the hell they're doing. I don't like the roster construction at all. They have a lot of centers on their roster now, like a lot of centers. I guess Young Hansen is not somebody that they feel. The Tom Dundon stuff with firing everybody in the front office and doing the shit that he is, like, honestly, if they move the Portland Trailblazers, like, I hope that guy gets punched right in the dick. I'll just be real about that because I think it's an absolute laughable disgrace if they move the Portland Trailblazers because he bought the team to move them. I think it's an embarrassment, and the league should force him to sell. What he's doing with this franchise right now is disgusting. But I digress. Overall, the offseason, I don't like it. Right, brought back Robert Williams, brought in Brendan Carlson, who's a guy that I like. The John Morant trade, I don't know why you do that when you already have Dame and Drew Holiday and Shaden Sharp, and you're about to have to pay Scoot Henderson, and it's awful. So between the Tom Dundon stuff, between the Morant deal, which I hate, between having a roster that's entirely constructed essentially of point guards and centers, and everything in between, I may give it. There you go, Kev. I agree with you. It's a D. It's a D off season at the end of the day. I don't like it. Yeah, I don't think that John Morant brings positive enough light on any level to be a ownership move asset at this point. Like I said, the play has declined, the athleticism has declined, the jump shooting has declined, the off court stuff is ridiculous, and he can't stay healthy. So I just don't know. I just don't see it the same way. But Sacramento Kings, I thought they were going to do a lot more, and then they didn't. So brought back Achua, brought back Plowden. That's fine. Traded away Devin Carter, which I was glad to see him get a new start somewhere else. Drafted Darius Acuff at 7, which is an awesome player. I don't think he's necessarily the exact player that fits this roster, but this roster doesn't make any damn sense anyways. So it's not like his lack of defense is going to hurt a team that largely doesn't defend at any position. As an overall, didn't like their offseason, didn't like the fact that they have kind of refused to move off of the core of this team outside of DeMar DeRozan, who's still a free agent. As an overall, like I said, the Darius Acuff pick is going to bring it up because he's a damn good dynamic player despite some of his flaws. The offensive potential is through the roof. So I'm not going to be too ruthless about it. But as an overall, I didn't think they did enough. Sacramento Kings, for me, it's a C. It's a C off season. Without Acuff as a draft pick, there would be much lower. But Sacramento Kings just being the Sacramento Kings and doing stuff that doesn't always make sense. San Antonio Spurs, let's be real. They got Victor Wembanyama to take a 25% max. That is absolutely critical when it comes to holding onto this team long term. Signed Harrison Barnes to deal, brought back Julian Champagny, brought back Jordan McLaughlin, and added Tobias Harris, which is, I think that it's a great signing. He is better than Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes played real legitimate minutes for them the last year. I think he gives them some size on the wing as well in that 4 spot that will be helpful for them, allow their young guys to continue to develop. The draft, it was weird, but I loved it. Alex Caravan's definitely not a San Antonio Spur. He's on the Sacramento Kings. Actually, Sacramento Kings, I may give them a C+ because I did like some of their draft picks. At the end of the day, I did like Acuff. Obviously Sharp is there as well, who I was way higher. Like I was way higher in Emmanuel Sharp than some people, and then Caravan. So no, I'm still going to stick with it as C. But I did like their draft. I did like their draft because Emmanuel Sharp was a steal. I think the Caravan pick was a reach, but like he's a player that can be functionally helpful for them. But yeah, Quaintance, Terrace Reed. I feel like there's one more draft pick here as well that's being missed on right now. But I thought they had a really good draft, swung hard and heavy for high end potential, and then also just got somebody who's absolutely rock solid in their role. So I thought it was really, really good. At the end of the day, without the Tobias Harris ad, without the solid draft, without bringing back Julian Champagny, just by signing Victor Wembanyama to the deal that they got him to, it's an A+ offseason. You don't like the Julian Champagny signing? Ooh, I think it's really good. Like it's the top end of what I'd want to pay for him, but like it's an MLE deal. If he was on the free agent market, he'd make the mid-level exception because of how well he shoots the ball, and like he's a damn good defender, and he doesn't need the ball to be impactful. Well, they're not going to move off Castle. They can't move off Castle. It would be Fox if they could. We'll see if they're able to move off Fox at the end of the day. Maybe that's the Steph Curry trade. Steph Curry for De'Aaron Fox and a bunch of picks. Let's do it. Let's make that happen right now. Actually, I love that deal. I love the idea of that trade. Right off, I love it. So let's do that. But it's an A+ offseason for the Spurs. My Toronto Raptors are up next. Gave Elijah Martin a full standard contract. They drafted Alan Graves, who, like I said, like I thought there was better players on the board, but I like the player, right? So a lot of people have gotten in this thing where they think I hate Alan Graves. I don't hate Alan Graves. I think Alan Graves is a good player. There was two players available from a completely different tier that were still available on the board. So I obviously, when it comes to that, I would want the players with the higher tier because I have them ranked higher. But I like Alan Graves as a player. Like I said, there was players I preferred instead. Losing Mamu, that sucks. Like that hurts a little bit. He filled a role. Now, obviously, getting Alan Graves and the development of Colin Murray Boyles and everything else adds to being able to kind of mitigate those losses. Bringing in Kyle Anderson helps mitigate that loss just slightly. Kyle Anderson's not going to play a lot of minutes, but he can fill a role. The reality is acquiring Kawhi Leonard, hypothetically, we'll make the assumption that Kawhi Leonard's a Toronto Raptor for the package they gave up for him. I think it's just a great trade. So as an overall, I can't be mad about this offseason at all. I think they killed it. I think it's an A. I think it's an A offseason. You know what? No, it's an A-. It's an A- offseason. I would like to see them add one more specific piece. But I think it's an A-. They had a great offseason. Adding Kawhi is huge. That front court potentially for closing games with Colin Murray Boyles, Scotty Barnes, Kawhi Leonard, just being able to defend on the wing and in the perimeter or in the interior, I think is massive. This team's going to be a defensive juggernaut if they progress the right way, and to see what happens with the rest of the roster. Steph Curry trade. I don't see it happening. Like I said, I jokingly said earlier, if you want to make the money work, it's got to be Barrett quickly, and then you'd have to do 2 picks in a swap probably. I don't think they're dealing Steph Curry at the end of the day, right? So good offseason for the Toronto Raptors. Steph Curry, I don't think it's going to happen, but I think that's where the money didn't happen. Now, if the Kawhi deal doesn't happen, then you have to find, if it doesn't happen and they hold on to Brandon Ingram and Grady Dick, then all of a sudden the offseason's like a D+. Yeah, D+. Like having them, the roster construction doesn't make a lot of sense. You lost Mamu. Your team got worse. So it'd be a D+. So it's a massive swing depending on if that deal goes through. Utah Jazz got a ton for Walker Kessler. Let's just say that right off. Losing Walker Kessler, if they held on to Walker Kessler, I had this as a playoff team in the West. Losing Walker Kessler and having to roll into Yusuf Nurkic as your starter and Filipowski as your backup 5, I don't like it as much. Mo Bamba getting a 2-year deal is an absurdity to me. Mo Bamba's a bad basketball player. Jackson Hayes being brought in, it's fine. Okogie, it's fine. Drafting Darren Peterson is huge, though. Right. So they got a ton of value back for Kessler, despite the fact that trading him made their team worse today. They drafted Darren Pearson. They made a couple fun additions, on the mid to back end of their roster. They didn't spend any overly bad money. Really good offseason as an overall. I'll say it's a B plus. I like where their roster construction is going. I still have questions about the Markkanen Bailey fit on the perimeter. Bailey's not really a two. He kind of has to play the three. I know some people disagree with you on that, but the self creation is just not there. So yeah, like I said, I really like the bones of this team overall. Thoughts on the Raptors getting Andre Jackson Jr. and Trey Jemison? Trey Jemison's a guy that I've always liked. He's a guy that I've always wondered why he doesn't get more of an opportunity to play at the NBA level, because I think he's tough and he's physical, and I think he's long enough, and I think he maximizes the opportunities that he does get. So I don't know him as a person. I don't know anything else, but I like that as an ad. Andre Jackson, like I said, it's a tryout contract. Guy defends his ass off. The offense is basically a zero right now. It's a transition. But it's a good ad on a tryout contract. What do you make of Jacoby Walter packing on massive amounts of muscle? Yeah, I wonder how real the muscle is. Like, you watch one video where a guy's like pumped, and sometimes it look like more. Obviously, he did put on weight for sure. Obviously, going through the course of an NBA season, you're going to lose weight. So it's a really, really good thing. He needed to add strength. Adding strength was critical for him. Colin Murray-Boyles also looks in phenomenal shape right now. So I think Colin Murray-Boyles trying to play the three this year. So it's yeah. I don't think that's what happened to Grady. I think Grady's never been the level of shooter that people thought he was, right? I didn't see it. I didn't see the elite shooter stuff in college. I saw a guy who was Kevin Huerter, right? A guy that can hit shots, but I wouldn't say is somebody that you have to guard 100% of the time. Do you see Darren Peterson being a point, or he'll primarily play the two? He can do either. He can do either. I think that Darren Pearson is spectacular. I had Darren Pearson as my number one prospect in the draft. I love the kid. I think he's awesome. I think he's great all over the court, and I think he's going to be able to develop. Kevin Huerter signed one of the worst deals in professional basketball history with the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons did a terrible job in that deal. But yeah, no, I think Darren Pearson's spectacular. That's a big reason why I'm giving the Utah Jazz the grade that I am, because I think he's a complete difference maker, whether he's on ball or off ball, and I think he can do both seamlessly. Oh, what impact do you think he'll have on his game? It's the defense, right? He just the extra side gives him more of an opportunity to deal with the physical pounding of the sport, and he's going to be asked to be in primary defensive role this year, right? He needs to be able to shoot it. He needs to be able to attack the basket and finish at a higher level. I think those are the big additive things for Jacoby Walter. And lastly, the Washington Wizards gave Trae Young a terrible contract, which was $20 million per season more than I would have ever considered signing Trae Young to, for way more term than they should have given him, to the point where his massive deal extends into the time frame where the younger players are going to have to be paid. So now, because of this deal, there's a possibility that you won't be able to keep a Keyshawn George, or you won't be able to keep a Koulibaly, or you won't be able to keep a Trey Johnson, because the Trae Young deal is prohibitively large, which is unfortunate. So we'll see if they're able to work some magic, but it's a bad deal, right? You can't give him that contract. There was nobody else that was going to give him that contract. The Brooklyn Nets weren't going to give him 4 years and over $200 million. So I don't like it. They drafted AJ DeBansa, who is a spectacular prospect. It floats their offseason for me. The DeAndre Ayton ad is fine. I think it's a good depth move if he can accept the fact that he's a depth player. Bring back Middleton, I think, is fine. He'll add some level of depth. I think they have a ton of depth right now. I don't like the roster construction as an overall, because I'm just not that high on Trae Young and Anthony Davis at this point. Their ability to stay on the court and their ability to, functionally play together consistently. So I don't necessarily love it. So they're going to have good moments. I think they're going to be a halfway decent team. They're going to win regular season games. AJ DeBansa was the perfect guy for them to draft, because he's a paint touch, and they need somebody that can get downhill and collapse paint. Because Trae at this point, like, the jump shooting has really, really sunk, and the ability to get to the rim has really, really sunk. And AD plays a very at the elbow oriented game. So having AJ as the ability to be a paint touch, I think, is really critical for them. I think they have a really fun roster of young players. I wish they would just embrace the youth and not have added $120 million of contracts that of aging players who have significant flaws. So that's where I'm at with that. So the Washington Wizards as a whole, that Trae Young deal is an F of a deal. The AJ DeBanza draft pick is an A+ pick. Everything else is kind of a little bit of a nothing burger. At the end of the day, I think that makes this a C+ offseason. So that is a lot of talking. That's a whole lot of talking. Somebody's saying Jovic for 8 and Cam Whitmore. You wouldn't be able to make that work money wise, I don't think. But I in that case, like the Heat aren't really getting anything. Again, they're getting a little bit of cap relief in a year, but that's really it. 30 NBA team grades. It's been a longer one, hour and a half we've been going. Again, if you want to support the channel, look at the memberships, send the super chats, do stuff like that. We'll talk more about the podcast that's coming up. That will be the first one will be recorded through True Sports on the Thursday this week. And check out the content, like the videos, watch things through, and support however you can. If you don't follow me on YouTube, or if you don't follow me on Instagram or TikTok or wherever, give me a look other places. And for the TikTok people, like if you don't follow me on YouTube, give me a subscription over there, because that's really what I'm trying to build up. So with all that being said, I hope everybody has a great day, and I'll see you again next time. All right. Have a good day. Bye.